In today's lesson, we're looking at doing an observational drawing, like the one here. There are many ways to approach this, and this is just one way. You're going to see a 20-minute sketch broken down into 4 main stages, and the aim here is to get a good, accurate drawing quickly, not perfect, but recognisable and with 3D form. All you're going to need is pencil and paper. We're not doing any rubbing out. This isn't about perfection, this is about practice and working through the steps that are shown here. Before we can start, we need to pick an object to draw. I'm going to look at a few ideas here, good and bad. An iPhone, a bad idea. Too flat, too simple, hard to make look three-dimensional, hard to do well. A book, the same. It's too flat, it's too simple a shape, it's hard to do this well. Slightly better idea here, an apple. It's less flat, but it's still quite simple, so unless you do it perfectly, hard to make look 3D. Better would be if you took a bite out of the apple. It's a more complex shape to draw and actually creates more shadows. Harder to draw, but easier to draw well. A chocolate bar, again, very flat, on its own, boring, and quite hard to do well. Take a bite out of it and open the wrapper though, and you get some interesting shadows, some complex shapes, harder to draw, but easier to do well. A plant, too complex for the time we've got. We'll be able to do this much detail well enough in a short drawing. Bananas, on their own, maybe too simple, but put 3 together and you get a complex shape as well as some interesting shadows that help make it look three-dimensional. This would be a good choice. In the end, I decided to go for a shoe. It's something you can all find at home. It's an interesting shape, but not so complex we can't do it in the time. It's not flat, so the shadows make it easier to make it three-dimensional. You can choose something different, but just remember, nothing that's flat, nothing that's too simple, and something that is going to be doable in the time. We're looking to do this in around 20 to 30 minutes. It's also useful to think about lighting. I've got a desk lamp from the left-hand side, so I get a clearly defined dark area, a clearly defined light area, and it makes it easier to draw this shoe and make it look three-dimensional. I also get some nice dark areas on this side, a clear defined shadow underneath, and making this easier to see for me will make it easier to do the drawing well. Step 1. We're going to start this drawing by using some plotting points. Little marks across the page that basically give us a guide to where we want our shoe to fit on the page. All we're looking at here is getting the size of the shoe on the page right. No detail, nothing to do with the shape, just making sure our shoe fills around 75% of the page. So I'm going to start by putting a few marks at the bottom of the page. This is roughly where I want the sole of the shoe to go. Some at the left where I think the heel should roughly aim to go. The highest point of the shoe is the tongue. I'm going to put a little mark in for where I think that should go. And to the right hand side where the toe of the shoe should go. So what I have at the end of this stage is a few guidelines on the page. If my actual shoe drawing goes near these, not necessarily on them, I'm going to have a shoe that fills around 75% of the page. Not too small, not so big that it's coming off the page, not slightly too far to one side. If I can get near these guidelines, my shoe is going to look very effective on the page. Step 2, and here we're looking at the shape of the object you're drawing. The most important thing at this stage is just to make sure you keep looking at the thing you are drawing so that you can get the shape as accurate as possible. I'd also recommend drawing quite faintly. The way I'm going to do this is draw over the outline 2 or 3 times until I get it right. If you make a mistake, it doesn't matter, you can redraw it, you can draw over it, but we're doing this quite quickly so there won't be time for any rubbing out. Now, I've started my drawing at the heel of the shoe. That was simply because I thought that was the easiest place to draw, so it's a nice place to give you a bit of confidence when you start. Seems the most obvious place to start for me. As I'm drawing, you'll notice that some of the lines I draw go straight over those plotting points from earlier. Some of them go near them, but don't quite match up. It's fine if your lines don't match up with the plotting points. The idea of the original plotting points was to give you a rough idea of where the shoe should go if you're going to fill most of the page, but not too much and not too little. So don't stick rigidly to the plotting points, use them as a guideline, not a rule to follow. It's worth remembering at this stage to keep your lines as faint as possible. We're going to go over this drawing again, redraw certain bits. It's very unlikely we'll get the shape 100% right first time, so if you keep your lines nice and faint, we can work over them without having to stop and rub things out and waste time. And we're trying to do a quick drawing here. At this stage of the video, I've sped things up slightly because essentially we're going to repeat the same stage again and again. We're going to keep redrawing the shape of the shoe until we're happy with it. It's very unlikely that you'll get the shoe 100% right first time, which is why you've drawn it quite faintly. You might find that some bits of the shoe are right first time, so we'll leave those alone. But any bits that aren't quite right, you're going to check them by looking at the shoe and comparing it to your drawing, and we're just going to redraw them over the top of it. Remember, we're trying to do this drawing quite quickly, so if you do move things like I do here with the toe, don't take time to rub out the original lines. Most of those are going to end up blending into the tone we add later anyway. So just keep working over the outlines, keep improving things, keep looking at the original shoe, comparing it to yours, but try and work quickly at the same time. And don't worry too much about any extra lines that aren't quite right. Keep those in the drawing for now. Key thing with this stage, with getting the shape right, whatever object you are drawing, you must keep looking at that object. Compare it to the drawing, make any changes as necessary. Again, we're doing a quick drawing, so no rubbing out, just draw back over it, move things if you need to, keep checking back with the original object. How do you know if you've done it right? Again, you just need to keep looking back, comparing yours to the object, and as long as you keep doing that, you'll get the shape at least 80% right, if not more. Step 3, and this is where we add tone to our drawing, essentially the lights and darks, where the shadows are on and around the shoe, and hopefully this will make it look three-dimensional if you do it right. I'd recommend using the side of the pencil. This gives you a nice smooth effect on the page, and actually it fills the page a lot quicker as well, so it's the best of both worlds. If you're going to do this stage really well, you're looking at two things. Getting the tone in the right place, so that means looking very carefully, where are the darks, where are the lights, but also blending those tones. So rather than changing suddenly from dark to light, can you blend gradually from a dark tone to a mid-tone and then to a light tone? And that's going to show the most skill in the drawing and actually make it look the most realistic. Where you should start on your drawing is entirely up to you. I always again go for the easiest bit. So I found it quite easy to see that the inside of the shoe was dark and quite easy to see that underneath the shoe was dark as well. So I've done these two bits first. As you're adding tone, you should also think carefully about the direction you're shading in. Underneath the shoe, where it's a flat surface, I've done a lot of horizontal lines, suggesting that it is a flat surface. As I come to do the toe of the shoe, where it curves around, I've tried to shade using curved lines. This should help make the toe feel like it's a curved shape. This is called the contours. If you follow the contours, the shape of the shoe, as you're shading, not only are you adding tone, you're actually helping to make the shoe look more rounded or more flat, depending on the bit you're drawing. Don't be scared while you're drawing to go quite dark with the tone. If the original object has got some darker areas, then layer up the pencil or press a bit harder and make the tone dark to match. If you're not sure if the tone you're drawing is right, you've got to check it against the original. Again, with the other stages, it's the same. Keep looking, keep comparing to your drawing, and keep changing things if you need to. We're doing a quick drawing here, so it's unlikely you'll get all the tone in the exact right places, but as long as you look very carefully, you should get most of the tone mostly in the right place, and that way it's going to look three-dimensional, which is the effect we're after. So with the fourth step, we're going to look at adding some detail. Again, we're doing a quick drawing, so maybe not all the detail, but what we want here is enough to make it recognisable as whatever object it is. My tip here again is just keep looking. Make sure you look very carefully at the object in front of you and don't make things up. Here I'll switch back to the tip of the pencil for a nice sharp line so I can get more detail in. Looking back at the drawing now, I think actually it's a mistake to go quite so bold with these outlines here. So just be careful as you're adding detail and going over things again that you don't make certain areas of the shoe stand out too much. Adding in the little details here, like the logos, it really helps make things look recognisable. So this is probably the most satisfying stage of the drawing. It's where it starts to feel complete. Adding in the details includes things like finishing off the outlines, but also adding things like texture. So on the laces here, I've used cross-hatching. It's a quick drawing, I haven't got time to do in loads of detail, but adding a little bit of texture just makes them feel a little bit more like shoelaces. Just a very quick bit of texture on the sole of the shoe to finish things off. And a reminder, this is supposed to be a quick drawing, take between 20 and 30 minutes. We're looking for two things here. Is it recognisable? And does it look three-dimensional? You could always take more time and refine it and make it look as realistic as possible, but the two main things you're looking for are making the object recognisable and making it look three-dimensional. There is one final thing you can do if you want to make this drawing feel even more complete, and that's to think about the negative space, the space around the object. At the moment it feels a little like the shoe's floating in space, so by adding a horizon line roughly on the middle of the page, making sure it meets up on both sides, feels a little more like the shoe is sat either on a table ledge, maybe on a shelf, and less like it's floating. I'm also going to add a little bit of tone to the background. Here I'm using a mid-tone so that you get a bit of perspective in the drawing. I've got what looks like a white table in the foreground, so that feels like it's closer to you. I've got a dark background, it should feel like it's further away. And also by adding this background in, you get some contrast. So hopefully the shoe should stand out against this background that you're adding in. Particularly if you use these vertical lines that I'm using here, it makes it feel like it's some kind of wall or surface like that, and the shoe should stand out against it. So have a go at doing this yourself. I'd say take about 20 to 30 minutes on it, and rather than spending longer than that, maybe do a few of them to get practice. It's not about perfection, it's about building your skills, so try as many of these as you can.